Welcome back, everyone. Jake here. Currently, we're on day 86 of Russia's disastrous invasion of Ukraine, and it's estimated that over 28,000 Russian soldiers have been killed so far. This is an extremely deadly conflict for both sides, but Russia is still losing several hundred soldiers a day. In my last update video, I showed you a clip that went viral in Western media of a retired Soviet colonel on Kremlin state propaganda TV. His name is Mikhail Kordyanok, and he said some pretty shocking things that normally the Russian public doesn't get to hear. He said Russia is in full geopolitical isolation, virtually the entire world is against Russia right now, and Russia needs to find a way out of this conflict because Ukraine is not going to surrender anytime soon. He gave some pretty honest statements that you're not allowed to say on Russian propaganda TV. And sure enough, 2 days later, he basically had to backpedal what he said. I'll link this clip down below if you want to watch it, but he's saying Russia's doing fine, Russia's going to win this conflict. My guess is the FSB showed up at his house and threatened his grandchildren if he didn't get back to the official approved Kremlin talking points. However, I did look into this colonel a little bit more, and he made a statement about a week and a half ago that was also pretty interesting. This one didn't get as much attention, but he's talking about why hasn't Russia fully mobilized? Why haven't they called up several 100,000 reservists in order to rush them into Ukraine so that Russia has a better chance of winning this conflict? So this clip is about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Let's watch it together.
Представим, что, например, раздался грохот больших и малых барабанов, затрубили фанфары, объявлена мобилизация. Вот когда мы получим, например, первый истребительный авиационный полк по мобилизации? К Новому году будет. У нас нет ни резерва, ни пилотов, ни летного состава, ни самолетов. Поэтому мобилизация в этом плане мало что дает. Но если мы сегодня ночью прикажем строить новые корабли, когда мы получим первый? Через 2 года. Вот так обстоит дело с мобилизацией. Поставим задачу сформировать, например, танковую дивизию. Когда она будет готова? Ну, я скажу, М-90 это как минимум. И то она не будет оснащена современным вооружением, потому что в его запасах просто нет от современного вооружения и военной техники. А посылать людей, оснащенных оружием вчерашнего дня, на войну 21 века, сражаться с оружием НАТО, которое соответствует сейчас всем, так сказать, мировым трендам, ну, наверное, тоже будет не совсем правильно. Конечно, восполнять потери надо. И в личном составе, и в вооружении, и в военной технике. Но все-таки делать это лучше за счет предприятий промышленности, которые производят современную и перспективную технику. Мобилизация в ее классическом понимании этих вопросов не решит.
This video is subtitled and he's speaking pretty fast, but basically all the other panelists are stunned by what he is saying, and this is what he said. Let's imagine mobilization in Russia is declared. How soon under this mobilization can we get the first aviation regiment ready? We would get it by New Year's. So he's saying best case scenario, 6 or 7 months. We don't have the reserves, the pilots, or the planes, so the mobilization would be of little help. If tonight we ordered new ships to be built, how soon will we get the first ship? 2 years. That's the deal with mobilization. If we set a goal of forming a new tank division, how soon would it be ready? He estimates 90 days. So by the end of the summer, they can get their first new tank regiment from mobilization. And what would it be equipped with? It wouldn't be modern weapons for these reservists. He then says that sending people armed with weapons of yesteryear to a war of the 24th century to fight against global standard NATO weapons would not be the right thing to do. Of course, we need to replenish our losses in terms of personnel, weapons, and equipment, but this should be done through industrial enterprises manufacturing the best, most modern, advanced equipment. Mobilization wouldn't help. So when you Google how many Russian reservists are there, and there's over 2 million. If you're not familiar with this process, I recently separated from active duty in the United States Air Force. I served for 6 years. However, I have an additional inactive reserve commitment of 3 more years. So if the United States were to go to war, they would recall me. They would call me back up and mobilize me because I recently got out. I have the training, I have the knowledge. It's much easier to, speed up and equip me than a brand new soldier. So why hasn't Russia called up 300, 400, 500,000 of these reservists to rush them into the war effort with Ukraine? This retired colonel makes the argument that it wouldn't do any good because they don't have any equipment to give them. It takes time to build new planes, new tanks, new ships. So his argument why they're not calling up the reserves is they don't have the ability to equip them. However, I think there's several other explanations why. The first one is I don't think Russia's system for tracking all of their reservists is that good. So if they did try to call up several 100,000 reservists, more than likely Russia would just embarrass themselves again. Maybe these people wouldn't show up, they wouldn't respond, or they couldn't even find them. But the real concern that I think that Vladimir Putin himself has in calling up several 100,000 men to rush them into Ukraine is the civil unrest this would cause at home. And a lot of these Russian reservists, these men, already work in the national security apparatus for the Russian Federation. These are police officers, security guards, prison guards, members of the FSB. So if Vladimir Putin were to call them up and mobilize them for war, send them to Ukraine, they can no longer keep the peace at home. They can no longer patrol the streets and stop the protests. There's virtually no protesting going on in any major Russian city anymore. The police have it on lockdown. Those people have been arrested. They're going to jail. So Putin, in my opinion, is more scared of civil unrest at home than he is losing the war in Ukraine. That is my primary argument why he's not calling up his reservists. Now, Putin's done a couple smart things. The first one is allowing Russians that want to leave Russia to leave Russia. It's estimated that millions of Russians have fled the country since this war started. Either they don't want to be persecuted at home, they want to speak freely and talk about the war abroad, or potentially they're avoiding the draft. They don't want to be conscripted or recalled. They don't want to participate at all in this conflict. So Putin was happy to let them leave. This is kind of a brain drain, but better they go abroad than they remain at home and potentially participate in any civil unrest. But the real concern I think Putin has is ethnic uprisings at home. The Russian Federation is a ethnically diverse and multinational state representing 193 ethnic groups nationwide. However, if we look at the biggest ones, people who identify as ethnically Russian, 77%, that makes sense. But look at these other large minority groups that reside within the Russian Federation. We have Turkic people, 8.42%, most of them being Muslim. People from the Caucasus, 4.9%, once again, many of them Muslim. Finnic people, 1.59%, Ukrainians, 1.3%. So if the Russian population is 144 million, and 1.35% of them identify as ethnically Ukrainian, how do you think those Ukrainian people living in Russia feel about this conflict? 1.35% of 144 million is over 2 million ethnic Ukrainians in Russia. There's been a lot of mysterious fires and explosions happening across Russia. Potentially, Russia is just incompetent, and these are lackadaisical safety standards. Or it's resistance cells, it's saboteurs, it's people unhappy with the war who are willing to blow up a military recruitment station or set fire at some kind of weapons lab. Same thing with the Finnic people. Finland is joining NATO. Potentially, this is another 2 million people living near the Finnish border who are not happy with the way the Russians have been treating them. But the biggest concern, population-wise, is these people from the Caucasus and the Turks. So here is an interesting map that has been put out. I'll link it down below. And I can't talk about the accuracy of these numbers because Russia lies about absolutely everything. But this has been put together by a channel called Pecha Beta 200 on Telegram. And what this is attempting to do is show the distribution of Russian casualties across the Russian Federation. So this is per capita, identified deaths of Russian soldiers per capita 100,000 people. So what this is attempting to demonstrate is that who is shouldering the burden of this war? Who is experiencing the most loss, the most funerals, the most young Russian soldiers being killed? And it's people in the poorer, more rural provinces of Russia. So here is St. Petersburg, Moscow proper and their suburbs. This is where all of the ethnic Russians live. And Vladimir Putin is happy to excuse people from military service, give military deferments to anybody who goes to university or is from a rich family. So it's the people in the rural provinces who are more ethnically diverse that are being conscripted and forced to fight this war. So when you look at this color wheel down here, identified deaths per 100,000 people, Moscow's looking pretty blue. And it's the Russian citizens in Siberia and the rural provinces who are losing the most right now in this Ukraine conflict. You can just look at this color wheel and see the red, orange, black, and brown from higher casualty rates as young men in these provinces are more likely to be conscripted, more likely to sign contracts with the military for the pay and benefits. There's just fewer opportunities for them out in the horde lands, basically. And Russia dare not call up all of these reservists because many of them operate as security guards, police officers, prison guards in these rural provinces to keep all these people in line. And the most well-known potential group that could cause another uprising is Chechnya. Russia has fought several wars with the Chechens in order to subjugate them and keep them under their control. And I don't know, what could potentially happen in the near term if the Russian national security state or the Russian central government weakens? And I don't know, do Western allies want to start arming the Chechens in order to encourage an uprising? Is this any different than the Russians basically arming the ethnic Russians in the Donbass region to uprise against the central Ukrainian governments? There's a lot of, is this ethical to do? Because the Chechens have resorted to terrorism in the past. The most famous incidents are the Russian apartment bombings of 1999, the Moscow theater hostage crisis of 2002, and the Beslan school siege of 2004. In the past, the Chechens have killed innocent civilians. They have resorted to terrorism. However, what is currently happening in Ukraine on the acts of the Russian military, I do define as terrorism. The Russian military is deliberately targeting civilians, deliberately bombing schools, hospitals, churches. So, is it ethical for the CIA potentially to smuggle in weapons, smuggle in support to help the Chechens if they know potentially they'll resort to acts of terrorism? These are kind of the discussions happening behind the scenes right now. But ultimately, I think the ethnic minority within Russia that Russia is the most concerned with is the Turkic people. And the most well-known are the ethnic Tatars. And it's simply because of their numbers. when you look at, once again, this ethnic breakdown, 8.42% of 144 million people is close to 12 million people. The largest and most well-known are, once again, the ethnic Tatars. Many of them were forcefully relocated from their native lands, some of them being from Crimea. And the Soviets deliberately relocated them to pretty unattractive land in Siberia. And they've done the best they can integrating once again into the Russian Federation. But potentially, with this opportunity with the Ukraine war, if the central government in Moscow is weakened, these people, 12 million of them, might want to form their own state, basically in the center of the Russian Federation. And they have the numbers. If they just want to stop paying their taxes and stop showing up for military service, I think this is the biggest concern for Moscow, simply because there's so many of them. Next piece of news to cover is that after a slight delay, the United States Senate is sending a $40 billion Ukraine aid package to President Biden to sign. This aid package passed with a vote of 86-11, and the Senate has also voted to confirm Bridget Brink to be the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and the State Department is going to reopen its embassy in Kyiv. And I actually think this is pretty significant because the United States government would not send State Department personnel to Kyiv unless they had reliable intelligence that they thought the city was safe for the time being. Obviously, in the future, if they get new kinds of intel out of Russia, they could change this and pull all of their U.S. staff out of the embassy because they don't want to risk their lives. But in the short term, I interpret this as Russia is not planning to launch some kind of nuclear, biological, or chemical attack on Kyiv. Otherwise, the State Department wouldn't be sending personnel and putting their lives at risk. Additionally, within this aid package, it's not been 100% allocated, and Ukraine is asking President Biden for these anti-ship missiles. They also want rocket launchers and different kinds of attack drones. But the most interesting thing that Ukraine might get is US-made Harpoon anti-ship missiles. And this is pretty advanced technology that normally we wouldn't give to a non-NATO ally. But I think that the United States, over the next couple months, will deliver these anti-ship Harpoon missiles to basically sink all of the Russian Black Fleet. And the reason why is because this conflict in Ukraine is going to have devastating ramifications on the rest of the world. Because Russia is currently blockading all of Ukraine's exports out of Odessa. Russia wants to block all their exports to cause economic harm to the country, but in a way this is going to severely disrupt the global food chain, the global food supply. This statement is put out by the World Food Program, and this is what it says. Failing to open Ukrainian ports means declaring war on global food security. This is according to David Beasley, who is the UN World Food Program Executive Director. And this is what he says. We truly are in an unprecedented crisis. Food pricing is our number one problem right now as a result of this perfect storm in 2022. But by 2023, it very well will be a food availability problem. We're not worrying about high prices, there just won't be any food to buy. When a country like Ukraine that grows enough food for 400 million people is out of the market, it creates market volatility across the world, which is what we are now seeing. So this is a global conflict now. This is no longer just a special limited military operation in the Donbass. By blocking Odessa and preventing all of Ukraine from exporting its food, there are regions in the world, mostly I think the Middle East and North Africa, that is going to experience legit famine. Hundreds of millions of people will not have enough food to live on. That will create a host of other problems, as there will be massive civil unrest within these regions and these countries. So ultimately, I think the United States is probably talking through back channels and letting Russia know, knock it off with the blockade. Let Ukraine get its food exports out. Otherwise, we're just going to give them the weapons and technology to sink every ship you have in the Black Sea. Perhaps NATO or some other country might even get involved in order to escort these exporting ships so that they can get their grain out of the country. The world just frankly needs it. The next piece of news we should talk about real quick is the first Russian soldier being put on trial for war crimes. He's pled guilty, and he's a 21 Russian soldier who on February 28th shot and killed an unarmed civilian, a 62-year-old Ukrainian man. I've watched the videos of the widow confronting him. I've watched the videos of basically his confession. More than likely, he'll go to prison for a very long time. And I think this is coming. I think there already are dozens, if not hundreds, of other Russian soldiers in captivity that are going to start being put on trial. So every week, every month, they're just going to try another Russian soldier, reveal the crimes, tell the story, let the world know what is happening. And I just don't understand or can't fathom what the reaction of the Russian public is, because a lot of these war crimes are being filmed. They're being caught on CCTV. People are filming them with their phones. The evidence is irrefutable. So how does the Russian propaganda war machine respond to pictures and images of these trials that I think are going to go on for a very long time? I think even after this conflict is over, Ukraine is going to continue with these war crime trials for a long time. Let's wrap up this video with a clip I found, and this beautiful church right here is St. Michael's Golden Dome Monastery. It's over 300 years old, and Russia hasn't destroyed it yet. But what you're going to listen to are the bell ringers of this cathedral, and it's quite nice. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you have any comments or questions or know something I don't, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, take care, be safe.